Basketball was originated in America in 1891 and has taken tremendous strides. Careful study of the basic skills involved and good teaching of basketball fundamentals have been largely responsible for its great popularity. One of the most important of these fundamentals is ball handling. It involves catching the ball, holding it, passing, faking, feinting, dribbling the ball, and shooting. This planned offensive action combines all these skills and shows the effectiveness of good ball handling. The man with the ball, number 8, fakes to number 34, but passes to number 12. 8 cuts by him, screening the play. 12 bounces the ball once and passes to 34, who fakes a return pass, but instead gives the ball to number 8 for a shot at the basket.
Peace and blessings. Welcome to GOAT James Kingdom. On this episode, we're going to discuss the evolution of the gameplay and the game style of the NBA. Now, the first thing we'll do is take you guys back to the 1950s to show you how the game originated and how the game was played back then. And what we're trying to look at is not the aesthetics of the game, the talent level or skill level. We want to look at how they're playing the game, how the referees are calling the game, how physical is the actual game. And here we have a 1950 NBA game being played, and this footage is available to us courtesy of Sports Revisit. But if we look at this 1950s game, what we can see here is clearly that these guys have freedom of movement, which means the defenders are not impeding anybody's progress with any part of their bodies, like their arms, their shoulders, their hips. Any part of your body was not allowed to prevent someone or impede someone from actually having their spot on the basketball court. So you're allowed to roam freely in the game of basketball, because the game of basketball is a game of speed, agility, and finesse. It's not a game of contact and aggression. So if we look at the way these guys are playing the game of basketball, you can clearly see that the defenders are moving their feet and keeping their hands active. The offensive players are moving the ball, and they're also moving without the ball throughout the game. And what you need to pay attention to is the big men. How are the big men playing? Are they banging or actually jostling for position? No, you don't see that. As you can see here, if the game gets a little too physical, they call a foul, because you're not allowed to actually use your arms, hands, or elbows to actually play defense. You're supposed to be able to move your feet and stay in front of your defender. As long as you do that, you are playing solid defense. And being that this is the 1950s, we can say that the rules in the game are organic as they ever been, and there should be no rule that prevents a defense from becoming physical. But in reality, there are rules set from the inception of basketball that didn't allow folks to get physical with one another. So as you can see here, the game was played at its purest. These guys are moving, the ball is moving, and the defense is playing exactly how they're supposed to play, which is between them and the basket. And that's how you play defense in basketball. Although we are watching a 1950 NBA game, and obviously the skill level, the athleticism is not the same as what we're used to seeing, we can still see the way the game is played by the game style and the actual gameplay. Because again, the game of basketball is a game of finesse, it's a game of speed and agility. And what we're watching is also guys taking 25-footers, 30-footers in this era. So shooting from the perimeter has always been in basketball from the beginning. But if we take it to the 1960s, which is the 1963 NBA Finals between the Boston Celtics and the Los Angeles Lakers, we can see a very similar style of basketball being played in the NBA. The level of skill has risen, the level of athleticism has risen, but the gameplay and game style is the same. As you can see, Bill Russell is not using his hands, arms, and body to play defense. He just has to stand between his man and the goal, and that is the way you play defense in basketball, because in reality, the offensive player themselves do not have a right to move you out of position as a defensive player. If we look at Sam Jones getting called for an offensive foul here, he legitimately tried to move his man out of position by using his body, which is an illegal move in basketball. You're not allowed to do that in basketball because the game of basketball has never been a game of physicality. It's been a game of finesse, which means you have to get around your defender. There's no reason to hand check or push on anybody because no one is allowed to actually impose themselves on anybody else by moving them with their body in any way. As you can see here, no one is hand checking. Nobody is bodying and jostling for position. This is not how the game is played. When you get too aggressive and use your hands and try to play defense this way, it is called a foul. This is the original way the game is played. As you can see here, Nate Barnett tries to actually step up here. And what does he do? He puts his hands out, and that is illegal in basketball. So they call that a foul. It didn't end, even if we take it to the 1970s. Here in the 1972 NBA Finals, we're going to watch how the Los Angeles Lakers and the New York Knicks play. Look at how Jerry Lucas is playing Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt Chamberlain cannot back down Jerry Lucas. That would be an offensive foul on Wilt Chamberlain. Jerry Lucas does not have to lean or put his elbow or put his arms onto Wilt Chamberlain because at the end of the day, Wilt Chamberlain is not allowed to move Jerry Lucas out of his position. And if we continually watch how these guys are playing, they're shooting outside perimeter shots, they're moving the ball, there's a lot of freedom of movement. There is nobody who is elbowing, pushing, and shoving. As you can see there, Wilt Chamberlain doing exactly what you're supposed to do. Widen your stance when you play defense because your actual offensive player has to get around the defender and cannot go through the defender nor shove or push the defender in any kind of way or it would be called a foul. So as you can see here, this is how the game was always played. And when you got aggressive and too physical, it was called a foul. If we continually watch how Wilt Chamberlain posts up, he cannot back down Jerry Lucas. That would be called a foul. Look at what he has to do here. He has to dribble side to side until he finds his position to actually get a shot off. The game of basketball is about position and actual angles, and you're not allowed to move somebody out of their position if they're standing firm in their position. And this is what we've seen for over 30 years of basketball. We took you back to 1946 and showed you how the game was played. And here you can see, again, when you get too physical, they call offensive foul. Why? Because the offensive player themselves are not allowed to move the defender out of position like this here with his body. That is a foul. The game was never made to be physical. That offensive player has to get around that defender. He cannot shove or push or run through the defender. This is how the game has always been played. Nothing has changed in the game of basketball for over 30 years, from the 50s to the mid-70s. And obviously it's because the game of basketball was played correctly at this time. There were no rules changes to make it to be a physical game. So you had to be able to play the game correctly, which was basically have the speed and agility and the finesse and skill level to be able to play the game. So if we continually watch what we're seeing here, all we see is freedom of movement, and we can see good defense by players standing in front of their man in between them and the basket. And that's how the game should have been played and continue to be played. But people don't like this style of basketball. They claim this style of basketball is not the golden age. Anyone who watched this basketball knows that this is the golden age of basketball because it is the purest form of basketball. And we're watching everybody being involved as well. You see the big men being involved. You see the perimeter players being involved. It is not just a one-sided basketball game. And as you can see, if we continually watch this, and this is where the most important part of all of this is how they actually rule and judge fouls back in these days. Watch Wilt Chamberlain get called for an offensive foul for a drop step dribble and a power move versus Jerry Lucas. He was not allowed to do that. Again, we'll watch it again. They call a foul on Wilt Chamberlain for a move we see all the time by big men. He does a drop dribble, pivots into his shot, and because he forcefully moved Jerry Lucas out of position with his body, it was called an offensive foul. Wilt Chamberlain was not allowed to back down his defender and just muscle his way to the basket. He physically was not able to do that by the rules of the game. So when we talk about the way the game of basketball has changed, what we see the change, and when we first start seeing the change, is in the late 70s and early 80s. Right here, we're looking at a 1982 NBA Finals. Why is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Caldwell Jones jostling and fighting for position in the post? We just saw Wilt Chamberlain and Jerry Lucas do none of this because the NBA changed the rules after the NBA-ABA merger to allow more physicality, to allow more hand checking. 1977 offseason, the NBA legalized hand checking and left it up to the referee to determine whether or not someone was impeding someone's progress by using their hands, arms, or body. But if we're looking at the gameplay, it's still the same here. There's a lot of freedom of movement, but because of athleticism and more skilled players, it is a little bit more physical, plus the rules. And on this play right here, we can see how the rules were changed, because right now, Andrew Toney got called for an actual defensive foul, which was actually an offensive foul just 20 years ago when we looked at the Sam Jones play. Here we have Magic Johnson driving to the lane. Andrew Toney's in position, but he gets called for the defensive foul. But just 20 years prior, this was called an offensive foul. So what changed between 1963 and 1982 to change this here from an offensive foul to an actual defensive foul? So if we continue to watch and see that the evolution of the physicality of the game changed very drastically and very quickly, because as you can see here, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar has to jostle for his defensive position when Jerry Lucas didn't have to do that just 10 years prior. So again, what was the difference between 1973 and 1982? The NBA-ABA merger, where now you started to have players who were more athletic, more skilled, which led the league to try to change rules or lax on rules so that the defenders can have an opportunity to defend these type of players that are entering the actual league. But it ended up leading to a lot more fights, a lot more physical play, which eventually had to be banned in 1978. But nonetheless, they still left it to the referees to determine whether or not someone was actually imposing their body or their hands or arms on the next defender. We are clearly looking at the evolution of physicality in basketball.
Welcome to GOAT James Kingdom, where basketball lives forever. You get to enjoy B. Lee and A. Johnny talk basketball every Sunday noon Eastern Time right here on the GOAT James Kingdom channel. Support by subscribing, and also check out the membership at GOAT James Kingdom.